In the grim darkness of the far future, humanity does not fear extinction. It fears inefficiency. Across 1,000,000 worlds, the Imperium of Man wages endless war against horrors beyond comprehension. Demons clawing their way out of reality, alien empires that devour suns, and traitors who would burn the galaxy for forgotten gods. Yet none of these terrors are the most disturbing thing you will ever encounter in Warhammer 40,000. The most terrifying creation of the Imperium does not lurk in the warp, does not descend from the stars, and does not roar its hatred at mankind. It stands silently in corridors, obeys without question, and works until its body finally collapses. It is called a servitor. At first glance, a servitor looks like a machine: metal limbs, augmetic implants, blank, glassy eyes staring through you rather than at you. They carry weapons, haul cargo, calculate firing solutions, or clean the blood from cathedral floors after mass executions. They are everywhere, on battleships, forge worlds, hive cities, and holy Terra itself. To the citizens of the Imperium, servitors are so common that they barely register, background noise, part of the architecture, just another tool keeping the vast machinery of empire moving forward. But here is the truth the Imperium never wants you to think about. A servitor is not a robot. It is not artificial intelligence. It is not even truly mechanical. A servitor is a human being, one whose mind has been carved apart, rewritten, or suppressed just enough to make them useful. Flesh repurposed, thought reduced to function, identity stripped away and replaced with obedience. Every servitor was once someone, and that is where the real horror begins. Because somewhere beneath the cables, behind the steel plates bolted into bone, inside the damaged remnants of a human brain, something may still be there. A flicker, a memory, a sensation of pain with no language left to express it. Some servitors are said to react to familiar voices. Some hesitate before carrying out commands they no longer understand. Some emit sounds that are not quite machine noise, distorted echoes of words that can no longer form. Whether these stories are true or simply inconvenient rumors is irrelevant. The Imperium does not investigate. It does not care. Function is all that matters. This is not horror built on jump scares or sudden violence. This is slow institutional horror, bureaucratic horror, the kind that thrives not on cruelty alone, but on indifference. Servitors exist because the Imperium decided that a human life is more valuable as equipment than as a person, because artificial intelligence is forbidden, but human suffering is renewable, because obedience is easier to manufacture than loyalty, and silence is preferable to dissent. So, when we ask the question, just how terrifying is a servitor really, we are not asking how dangerous it is in combat or how powerful its weapons may be. We are asking something far worse. We are asking what kind of civilization looks at its own people and decides that this is acceptable, that this is normal, that this is holy. And once you truly understand what a servitor is, you may begin to realize something deeply unsettling. In the Imperium of Man, death is not the worst fate. Sometimes survival is.
To understand why servitors are so terrifying, you must first strip away the lie the Imperium presents to its people. The lie is simple, comforting, and repeated endlessly until it becomes truth. Servitors are machines, tools, objects. They are described in official records as biological automation units, listed alongside cargo loaders and reactor components, categorized not as people, but as assets. This language is deliberate, because if the Imperium ever allowed its citizens to think of servitors as human beings, even for a moment, the entire moral foundation of the Empire would begin to crack. A servitor is not artificial intelligence. In fact, servitors exist precisely because artificial intelligence is forbidden. Long ago, humanity nearly destroyed itself with thinking machines, and from that ancient catastrophe came the strictest law in imperial history. No machine may ever be allowed to think like a human again. The solution was not to abandon automation, but to redefine it. If a machine could not be made to think, then a human could be stripped of thought and reshaped into something simpler, something controllable. Thus, the Servitor became the Imperium's answer to progress without heresy, a grotesque compromise between faith and necessity. Physically, servitors vary wildly depending on their purpose, but they all share the same brutal logic. Flesh is left intact where it is useful and removed where it is not. Arms are replaced with tools, weapons, or hydraulic claws. Spines are reinforced with metal braces to support unnatural loads. Eyes are swapped for augmetic lenses tuned to a single task, whether that is targeting enemies, reading data streams, or monitoring pressure gauges deep within a starship's hull. Portions of the skull are often removed entirely, replaced with cranial plugs, data ports, and control nodes that allow the servitor to receive commands directly into what remains of its brain. But it is the mind that defines a servitor, not by what it is, but by what has been taken away. Through chemical conditioning, surgical lobotomy, and hypno-indoctrination, higher cognitive functions are destroyed or suppressed. Personality, creativity, ambition, fear, hope, these are liabilities. They interfere with obedience. What remains is a reduced neural framework capable of understanding only the simplest instructions: move, lift, fire, clean, guard, repeat. In theory, there is nothing left to suffer. In theory. In practice, the Imperium's own records quietly contradict this comforting narrative. There are countless mentions of instability in servitor units, of erratic behavior, hesitation, and unexplained vocalizations. Some servitors must be periodically reset, their neural pathways scrubbed again when fragments of memory resurface. Others require constant sedation to prevent seizures or behavioral anomalies. These are not machines. They are the symptoms of damaged human minds struggling against the cages built around them. Servitors are sourced from many places, and none of them are reassuring. Some are criminals sentenced not to death, but to service. Others are political dissidents, heretics, or simply people who angered the wrong official. Failed Space Marine aspirants, those whose bodies survived implantation but whose minds or genetics were deemed insufficient, are sometimes quietly repurposed rather than wasted. On Forge worlds, vat-grown humans are bred specifically to become servitors, raised without education or identity, so their conversion is ethically efficient. The Imperium does not distinguish between these origins once the process is complete. All are reduced to the same status: equipment. What makes this truly horrifying is not the act itself, but its scale. Servitors are not rare. They are not hidden away as shameful secrets. They are produced by the billions and deployed everywhere. They stand beside priests during holy rituals. They march alongside soldiers on the battlefield. They operate life support systems in hospitals, maintain reactors that power entire cities, and pilot drones into lethal environments no living worker could survive. Children grow up watching servitors shuffle past them in the streets, learning early that this is simply how the world works. No one screams. No one protests. The horror is so normalized that it becomes invisible. And yet, for all the Imperium's efforts to reduce servitors to mindless tools, something keeps going wrong. There are reports, whispered, denied, erased, of servitors reacting to their own names when spoken aloud, of combat servitors freezing in the middle of a firefight, their weapons lowering for just a second too long, of maintenance servitors that pause in front of reflective surfaces, staring as if trying to recognize the broken thing looking back at them. These moments are fleeting, and they are quickly corrected with neural shocks or memory wipes, but they are enough to raise a terrifying possibility that servitors are not empty shells, but prisons. If that is true, that every servitor is a human consciousness buried under layers of programming, screaming silently while its body obeys commands it no longer understands, forced to work without rest, forced to kill without hatred, forced to exist without purpose. This is not slavery as it once existed in ancient history. A slave could dream of escape. A servitor cannot even conceive of freedom. The concept has been surgically removed. In this way, servitors reveal the Imperium's darkest truth. This is not a civilization fighting monsters to protect humanity. This is a system that survives by consuming its own people, breaking them down into components and feeding them back into the machine of empire. The servitor is the Imperium distilled into a single form, efficient, obedient, silent, and built upon unimaginable suffering. So when you see a servitor standing motionless in a corridor, waiting for its next command, remember this. That thing was not born a tool, it was made one. And the only thing more terrifying than what the Imperium has done to it is how completely everyone has learned to stop caring. Servitorization does not begin with surgery. That is the first misconception. The process begins long before flesh is cut or metal is grafted to bone. It begins with a decision, quiet, administrative, and utterly final. Somewhere in the Imperium, a name is removed from a citizen registry and replaced with a designation. A person becomes a resource. A sentence is passed not for justice, but for utility. From that moment onward, whatever that individual once was no longer matters. Their fate has already been sealed. The condemned are rarely told what awaits them. Some are promised labor, others are told they will serve the emperor in a new and sacred way. Many are drugged long before they understand what is happening. They are transported through corridors that smell of antiseptic, oil, and old blood, guided past chanting tech priests who do not see a human being walking between them. They see raw material, flesh that can still be repurposed, potential that has not yet been optimized. The chamber itself is not designed for comfort or dignity. It is designed for efficiency. Cold metal slabs, suspended surgical arms, rows of tools that resemble both medical instruments and industrial equipment, because in this place there is no difference between healing and mutilation. The air hums with binheric prayers, machine cant layered over the faint sobbing or frantic breathing of those who have not yet been sedated. Some struggle, some beg. Some are already silent, frozen by the realization that whatever happens next will not end with death. The first stage targets the mind, not gently, not cleanly. Neural inhibitors are injected to dull higher brain activity, followed by invasive cranial surgery to access the regions responsible for memory, emotion, and self-awareness. Portions of the skull are removed with mechanical precision. Electrodes are driven directly into living tissue. Chemicals flood the brain, dissolving synaptic pathways that once held childhood memories, personal fears, private hopes. This is not erasure, it is destruction. The mind is not wiped like a slate, it is shattered like glass. Pain is irrelevant to the process. Whether the subject feels it or not is a secondary concern, handled only insofar as it interferes with compliance. Screams are logged as vocal anomalies. Convulsions are neurological instability. At no point is suffering treated as something meaningful. It is simply noise. And once enough of the mind has been broken, that noise begins to fade, replaced by blank compliance or uncontrollable twitching. This is considered success. Only after the mind has been reduced does the body become the focus. Limbs deemed unnecessary are amputated, spines are reinforced with metal supports, organs that require too much maintenance are removed or replaced with cruder, more reliable mechanisms. Feeding tubes are installed so the servitor never needs to eat in any recognizable way again. Waste systems are rerouted. The body ceases to be human architecture and becomes a platform, something to mount equipment onto. Weapons may be grafted directly into arms, fused so completely that removal would destroy what remains of the limb. Tools are bolted into place rather than held, ensuring they can never be dropped or refused. Control implants are installed deep within the brainstem, allowing external systems or tech priests themselves to override any remaining impulses. By this point, the subject no longer resembles the person who entered the chamber. Even their face is often altered or partially removed, not out of cruelty, but because expressions serve no purpose. Throughout the process, prayers are spoken, not for the person, but for the machine they are becoming. The omniscia is praised, efficiency is sanctified, each cut is justified as necessary, each modification is holy. In the logic of the Adeptus Mechanicus, this is not an act of evil, it is an act of devotion. The human form is flawed, the machine form is pure, and what is being created here is something closer to purity than the subject ever was in life. Once the physical conversion is complete, the servitor is programmed. Simple behavioral loops are burned into the remaining neural tissue. Walk this path, perform this task, respond to this signal, ignore everything else. There is no room for interpretation, no capacity for refusal. The more complex the task, the greater the risk of failure, and thus the more aggressively the mind must be reduced. Intelligence is the enemy. Thought is a flaw. And yet, despite everything done to prevent it, the process is imperfect. Human minds are not designed to be stripped down so brutally without consequence. Sometimes fragments remain. A sensation of fear with no context, a memory with no image attached, a reflexive flinch when a familiar voice is heard. These remnants are not acknowledged by the Imperium. They are classified as errors, glitches to be corrected with further conditioning, but for the being trapped inside the servitor shell, they are torment without meaning. After servitorization, the new unit is tested. Commands are issued, compliance is measured. Any hesitation is punished with neural shock until the behavior is corrected. Once approved, the servitor is marked, cataloged, and shipped to wherever it is needed most. A battlefield, a factory, a starship reactor chamber where radiation slowly eats away at what remains of its flesh. There is no ceremony, no farewell, no record of who this individual once was. That information has already been deleted. This is the process the Imperium calls mercy. Not execution, not imprisonment, something worse, continued existence stripped of identity, purpose, and hope. A life extended only because it is useful, and ended only when the body finally fails. The servitor does not die when the surgery ends. It dies slowly, over years or decades, one task at a time. And the most unsettling part of all is this. The Imperium considers the process a success not when the servitor works perfectly, but when no one remembers there was ever a person inside at all.
The Imperium insists that servitors are mindless. It must insist on this because the alternative is unthinkable. If servitors are truly empty shells, if nothing remains behind their vacant eyes, then the system is brutal but efficient, cruel but necessary. But scattered throughout imperial records, sealed archives, and whispered accounts passed between those who have seen too much, there is evidence of something far worse. Evidence that the mind is not always fully destroyed. Evidence that sometimes, against all intent and design, a servitor remembers. It begins subtly, a pause where there should be none,
a slight delay between command and action, a servitor turning its head a fraction too slowly, as if confused by a stimulus it was never meant to notice. These incidents are logged as malfunctions, neural desynchronizations, or behavioral drift. Tech priests recalibrate implants, increase sedation, and purge corrupted memory sectors. To them, it is routine maintenance. But to those who witness these moments up close, it feels like something is trying and failing to wake up. Some servitors vocalize. This alone should be impossible. Their speech centers are usually damaged beyond recognition, left only with the capacity to emit confirmation tones or binheric clicks. And yet there are accounts of distorted words leaking through mechanical filters. Not sentences, not pleas, just fragments. Names spoken without context, sounds that resemble sobbing, garbled into static. A single repeated phrase looping endlessly until the unit is forcibly shut down. The Imperium classifies these events as auditory glitches. Those who hear them know better. More disturbing still are servitors that respond to familiarity. A combat servitor freezing when confronted by a figure it once knew. A menial unit flinching at the sound of a child's laughter echoing down a corridor. A maintenance servitor that repeatedly returns to the same location even when reprogrammed, drawn by a memory it can no longer access consciously. These behaviors serve no functional purpose. They do not increase efficiency. They cannot be explained by programming logic. They are remnants, emotional muscle memory surviving where intellect was supposed to die. For the mind trapped inside such a servitor, awareness is not continuous. It flickers. Moments of darkness give way to flashes of sensation, pain without source, movement without control, noise without meaning. There is no coherent narrative, no understanding of time. Days and years blur together into an endless present, defined by commands and compliance. When awareness surfaces, it brings no clarity, only terror. The realization that something is wrong, followed by the inability to understand what or why or how to stop it. Imagine waking up mid-motion, your body moving without permission. Imagine feeling your arm raise, your weapon fire, your hands crush something fragile, while your mind screams silently behind locked doors. There are no words left to form a plea, no mouth capable of shaping it. Only the certainty that you are still here, and the knowledge that you should not be. Then, just as suddenly, the awareness fades again, smothered by programming and chemical suppression, leaving behind nothing but residual dread.
The Imperium does not call this suffering. It calls it instability. Units exhibiting retained awareness are flagged for corrective action. Memory purges are intensified. Neural architecture is further degraded. In extreme cases, the servitor is recycled, stripped down, components salvaged, organic matter repurposed or discarded. There is no attempt to understand the phenomenon beyond how to eliminate it. To acknowledge that servitors can suffer would be to admit that the Imperium has built its infrastructure on eternal torment. There are darker rumors still, stories of servitors whose awareness never fully disappears, of beings trapped in constant consciousness, unable to escape even to oblivion. These cases are never documented openly, but they appear in forbidden texts and corrupted data slates seized from heretics and radical inquisitors. According to these accounts, such servitors exist in a state of permanent psychological agony, their minds screaming continuously while their bodies obey with perfect precision. They do not resist, they cannot, they simply endure. In these stories, the horror is not pain alone, but isolation. A servitor cannot communicate its suffering. It cannot ask for death. It cannot even understand the concept anymore.
It is aware enough to know it is trapped, but not enough to remember what freedom felt like. Identity erodes slowly, not through erasure, but through neglect. Memories surface only to dissolve again, like shapes seen through fog. The mind becomes a haunted ruin, echoing with sensations that no longer have meaning. This raises a question the Imperium will never allow itself to ask. If even one servitor is aware, truly aware, then servitorization is not punishment, nor utility, nor mercy. It is the creation of a living hell, a state worse than death, worse than slavery, worse than imprisonment. A condition where suffering has no purpose, no end, and no witness who cares enough to stop it. And yet, servitors continue to be made, not in secret, not in shame, but openly, proudly, as symbols of imperial efficiency. They march in parades, they stand guard in sacred halls, they serve as reminders that humanity endures through obedience, no matter the cost. The citizens who walk past them do not see the horror beneath the metal. They see safety, stability, order. That is perhaps the most terrifying aspect of retained awareness, not that it exists, but that it does not matter. The Imperium would continue even if every servitor screamed silently in endless agony, because the Imperium does not measure success in lives saved or suffering prevented. It measures success in continuity, in survival at any cost. If a servitor remembers, it remembers alone. Its pain is unrecorded, its fear is unacknowledged, its humanity is an inconvenience that will eventually be corrected through further degradation. The system is patient. It can wait for the mind to break completely. And somewhere deep inside a shell of metal and ruined flesh, a fragment of a human soul may still be waiting for a moment of clarity that will never come. Aware enough to know it is lost, but powerless to do anything except obey.
War in the Imperium of man is not fought solely by soldiers who believe, or even by those who understand what they are dying for. It is fought by systems, by logistics, by expendable bodies fed into the grinder until the enemy breaks or humanity does. In this endless equation of attrition, servitors occupy a unique and horrifying role. They are not warriors in the traditional sense. They do not fight for honor, duty, or survival. They fight because they have been built to do nothing else. On the battlefield, servitors move with an unsettling calm. Bolter servitors advance through artillery fire without hesitation, their heavy weapons fused directly into ruined arms, recoil dampened by reinforced frames and shock absorbers drilled into bone. They do not flinch when rounds tear into their flesh. They do not seek cover. Pain responses have been removed or overridden, leaving only the simple directive to advance, aim, and fire. To an enemy watching from across the killing field, they look unstoppable. To Imperial commanders, they are ideal. Troops that never panic, never disobey, and never retreat unless ordered. But their true value lies in their disposability. Servitors are deployed where human soldiers would falter. They are sent through minefields to detonate explosives with their bodies. They are marched into kill zones to draw enemy fire, mapping firing positions through their own destruction. When radiation floods a battlefield or chemical weapons saturate the air, servitors continue forward, flesh blistering and organs failing until their bodies physically collapse. No evacuation is planned, no recovery teams are dispatched. If a servitor falls, it is written off as equipment loss. Some of the most terrifying servitors are not infantry, but engines of war in their own right. Cataphron battle servitors rumble across the battlefield on tracked platforms, their torsos encased in armor, their lower bodies replaced entirely by machinery. Heavy plasma weapons, arc rifles, and grav cannons are mounted where limbs once were. These beings are not piloted. They are not controlled remotely. The remains of a human brain sit inside the armored shell, slaved to targeting systems and fire control logic, experiencing the war not as a sequence of choices, but as a flood of stimuli and enforced reactions. In close quarters combat, the horror becomes intimate. Assault servitors crash through breached walls and narrow corridors, chain blades screaming as they carve through anything in their path. They do not recognize surrender. They cannot distinguish between combatant and non-combatant unless specifically programmed to do so. Refugees caught in their advance are cut down with the same mechanical efficiency as armed enemies. There is no malice in their actions, no cruelty, just function, and that makes it worse. There are also servitors designed solely to kill without oversight. Murder servitors are unleashed into confined spaces, space hulks, underhives, derelict stations, where their simple logic becomes a death sentence for anything alive. Equipped with claws, blades, and built-in weapons, they stalk corridors endlessly, responding to movement, heat, or sound. They do not tire. They do not stop. Even after the original mission ends, many continue their patrols for decades, turning forgotten places into haunted labyrinths of steel and blood. From the perspective of Imperial command, these weapons are a triumph. They reduce casualties among valuable troops. They require minimal training. They inspire fear in the enemy and obedience among allies. But for those who fight alongside them, servitors are deeply unsettling. Guardsmen speak of the silence, of how servitors never shout warnings, never call for help, never react to the deaths around them. They simply step over fallen comrades, human and servitor alike, and continue forward, their optics glowing faintly as they search for the next target. Sometimes, however, the horror fractures. There are accounts of combat servitors hesitating mid-battle, their weapons lowering for a heartbeat too long, of targeting systems flickering as something interferes from within, a memory, a recognition, a moment of confusion triggered by a voice, a face, a fragment of the past colliding with the present. These moments are brief, often fatal. A servitor that hesitates is quickly destroyed, by enemy fire or by Imperial forces unwilling to risk contamination. The battlefield has no tolerance for doubt. When servitors are destroyed, there is no ceremony. Their wreckage is scavenged for reusable components. Data cores are extracted. Organic remains are either incinerated or processed into nutrient slurry for other units. The Imperium does not bury its servitors. There is nothing to mourn. The person they once were ceased to exist long ago, at least on paper. Yet for all this brutality, servitors are not the most terrifying presence on the battlefield because of what they do to the enemy. They are terrifying because of what they represent to those who still think, still feel, still fear. They are a glimpse of a possible future, a reminder that failure, dissent, or simple misfortune can strip away everything that makes a human human, leaving behind a weapon pointed at someone else. In war, the Imperium demands total obedience. Servitors are obedience perfected. They are the endpoint of a philosophy that values victory above life, function above dignity, survival above mercy. They do not question orders because they cannot. They do not suffer in ways the Imperium acknowledges because suffering has been defined out of existence. And as the guns fall silent and the battlefield smokes with the aftermath of slaughter, servitors that still function are gathered up, repaired if possible, and prepared for the next conflict. Those that cannot be salvaged are left where they fell, their ruined forms rusting among the corpses of those who at least died knowing who they were. In this way, servitors are not just weapons of war, they are monuments to the Imperium's willingness to sacrifice its own humanity in order to survive, silent proof that in the far future, victory does not belong to the righteous or the brave, but to those who can endure becoming something monstrous.
Statistics make servitors easy to ignore. Numbers dull the mind, blur the suffering, and turn horror into abstraction. Billions repurposed, millions deployed, countless units lost and replaced. But horror becomes real when it is personal, when it has a voice, a place, a moment that refuses to be forgotten. Across the Imperium, there are stories that never make it into official records. Stories told in whispers, scratched into forgotten data slates, or passed down by those who witnessed something they were never meant to understand. These are not legends. They are fragments of truth that survived erasure. The first story comes from a hive city that no longer exists. Deep beneath its upper spires, an ancient transit shaft ran between levels long since abandoned. The elevators had stopped centuries ago, sealed in place by collapse and neglect. Maintenance servitors were sent periodically to inspect the area, though no one remembered why. One servitor, designated only by a serial number, was assigned to the shaft and never reassigned. It remained there for decades, standing motionless beside the broken elevator doors, activating only when its inspection timer demanded movement. Workers who passed through the shaft began to notice something wrong. The servitor would sometimes turn its head toward the dark elevator opening, as if listening. On rare occasions, it emitted a low, distorted sound, not a confirmation tone, not binheric code, but something almost like a name. The sound repeated at irregular intervals, always the same pattern, always followed by complete stillness. When a junior overseer reviewed old transit records, he discovered that the shaft had once been the site of a catastrophic failure. An elevator had fallen. Hundreds had died. Among the victims was a transit operator whose duty station had been precisely where the servitor now stood. The servitor was decommissioned shortly after. No explanation was given. The shaft was sealed permanently. Whatever had been waiting there was never allowed to finish remembering. The second story is recorded only in fragments from a regimental after-action report. During a planetary assault, an Imperial Guard unit advanced alongside a line of combat servitors tasked with suppressing enemy fortifications. The fighting was brutal and chaotic, visibility reduced to smoke and ash. At some point during the advance, a young guardsman stumbled and fell, his leg shattered by incoming fire. As the unit pushed forward, he screamed for help, certain he had been abandoned. One of the servitors stopped. In the middle of the battlefield, under heavy fire, it turned toward the fallen guardsman, targeting systems disengaged, weapon arms lowered. For several seconds, an eternity in combat, it simply stood there. Then it moved, not to fire, not to advance. It reached down and lifted the guardsman, placing him behind a shattered wall, away from the kill zone. Only then did its weapons rearm. Only then did it resume its advance. The servitor was destroyed minutes later by enemy anti-armor fire. The guardsman survived.
When questioned afterward, the guardsman could not explain why the servitor had helped him. The unit's tech priest declared the behavior a catastrophic malfunction and ordered an immediate purge of all remaining servitors' neural cores. The incident was stricken from the official report. But among the guardsmen who saw it happen, a question lingered, one no one dared speak aloud. If the servitor could choose to save someone, what else might it have remembered? The final story is the most disturbing because it does not end cleanly. On a forge world devoted entirely to servitor production, a minor systems failure caused a brief power interruption in one of the processing wings. For less than a minute, control implants went offline, chemical suppression systems faltered, neural inhibitors ceased function. In that minute, the screams began. Not the mechanical shrieks of malfunctioning units, but human screams. When questioned afterward, the guardsman could not explain why the servitor had helped him. The unit's tech priest declared the behavior a catastrophic malfunction and ordered an immediate purge of all remaining servitors' neural cores. The incident was stricken from the official report. But among the guardsmen who saw it happen, a question lingered, one no one dared speak aloud. If the servitor could choose to save someone, what else might it have remembered? The final story is the most disturbing because it does not end cleanly. On a forge world devoted entirely to servitor production, a minor systems failure caused a brief power interruption in one of the processing wings. For less than a minute, control implants went offline, chemical suppression systems faltered, neural inhibitors ceased function. In that minute, the screams began. Not the mechanical shrieks of malfunctioning units, but human screams, raw, terrified, and desperate. Servitors thrashed against restraints, their bodies convulsing as long-dormant awareness surged to the surface. Some cried out names, some begged, some laughed hysterically, unable to comprehend the sudden return of sensation after years or decades of darkness. One servitor repeatedly whispered a single sentence, "I don't want to forget again." Power was restored, suppression systems re-engaged, the screams cut off mid-sound, replaced by silence and the steady hum of machinery. The official explanation cited mass hallucination caused by electromagnetic interference. The tech priests involved were reassigned. The processing wing was sealed and rebuilt. But a single data slate survived the purge, smuggled out by a menial who later disappeared. On it was a simple note, written in shaking hands. They were still in there. These stories are not exceptional. They are simply rare moments when the system falters, when the Imperium's carefully constructed lie slips and the truth bleeds through. They reveal what servitors truly are, not as concepts or assets, but as ruined people caught between existence and oblivion. Each story is a reminder that servitorization does not erase humanity, it buries it. For the Imperium, these incidents are inconveniences, glitches to be corrected, evidence to be destroyed. For the listener, they are something else entirely. They are proof that the horror is not theoretical, that beneath every metal plate and augmetic lens may lie a consciousness still capable of fear, memory, and regret. And perhaps the most chilling realization of all is this: these stories are only the ones that escaped. For every servitor that hesitated, remembered, or screamed, there are countless others who never will, who remain trapped in perfect silence, their suffering so complete that it leaves no trace behind. In the Imperium of man, the worst horrors are not always the loudest. Sometimes they stand quietly in forgotten places, waiting for commands that will never stop coming, carrying memories no one is allowed to acknowledge. By the time someone truly understands what a servitor is, the question is no longer whether they are terrifying. That answer is obvious. The real question becomes why they exist at all, and what their existence reveals about the civilization that depends on them. Servitors are not an accident. They are not a temporary measure born of desperation. They are a deliberate choice, made again and again across 10,000 years of imperial history. They are the Imperium's values given form, stripped of rhetoric and displayed in their most honest state. The Imperium claims to be humanity's shield. It tells its citizens that every sacrifice is made so the species may endure, that every cruelty is a necessary evil in a galaxy that offers no mercy. And in many ways, this is true. The universe of Warhammer 40,000 is unimaginably hostile. Demons devour souls. Alien empires grind civilizations into dust. Rebellion invites annihilation. Survival demands brutality. But servitors expose a darker truth hidden beneath this justification. They reveal that the Imperium does not merely accept cruelty, it has perfected it, ritualized it, and built an entire infrastructure upon it. Servitors exist because the Imperium fears thinking machines more than it values thinking people.
Artificial intelligence is forbidden not because it is dangerous, but because it is uncontrollable. A human mind can be broken, conditioned, and erased. A machine mind cannot be threatened with pain or obedience. The servitor is the solution to that problem. It is a way to automate without surrendering control. It is proof that the Imperium would rather destroy a human soul than risk losing authority. This is why servitors are everywhere. They are not hidden away like shameful secrets. They are displayed openly in temples, factories, war zones, and palaces. They march beside priests during holy processions. They guard the chambers of imperial governors. They maintain the golden throne itself. Their presence is not accidental. It is instructional. It teaches the population a silent lesson. This is what happens to those who are no longer useful as people. And yet, the Imperium insists that servitors are merciful, that servitorization is preferable to execution, that it allows the condemned to continue serving the Emperor in some small way. This lie is repeated so often that even those who oversee the process begin to believe it. But mercy implies relief. It implies an end to suffering. A servitor's existence offers neither. It is punishment without closure, obedience without understanding, survival without dignity. It is life stretched thin and repurposed until nothing remains but function. What makes this revelation so unsettling is that servitors are not created by villains twirling in the shadows. They are created by priests, administrators, and engineers who believe they are doing the right thing. The Adeptus Mechanicus does not see servitors as victims. They see them as sacred constructs, closer to machine purity than flawed humanity. Imperial bureaucrats do not lose sleep over servitor quotas. They see numbers on a ledger balancing out. Even ordinary citizens rarely question the practice, because questioning it would mean questioning the Imperium itself, and that is far more dangerous than acceptance.
Servitors also reveal the Imperium's greatest fear. Not extinction, but chaos. Not death, but unpredictability. A thinking, feeling human is inherently unstable. They doubt, they rebel, they make mistakes. A servitor does none of these things. It obeys, it repeats, it endures. In a galaxy defined by endless war, that reliability is priceless. And so the Imperium chooses certainty over compassion every single time. In this light, servitors are not the exception to imperial cruelty, they are its logical conclusion. They represent what happens when survival becomes the only moral framework left, when victory is valued more than humanity, when the question is no longer, should we do this, but can we afford not to? The answer again and again is yes. Humanity can be afforded, it is replaceable. This is why servitors are more disturbing than any daemon or alien horror. Those enemies come from outside, they threaten humanity. Servitors come from within, they are humanity, reshaped into something that no longer needs hope, freedom, or choice. They are the Imperium's quiet confession that it has already accepted the loss of everything it claims to protect. And perhaps the most tragic irony of all is this. The Imperium believes servitors are proof of its strength, proof that it can endure at any cost. But in truth, they are evidence of its failure, evidence that humanity could not find a way to survive without consuming itself, that it chose obedience over understanding, control over compassion, continuity over conscience. When you look at a servitor, you are not just seeing a tool, you are seeing the future the Imperium is building, one where being human is a temporary condition and usefulness is the only measure of worth. A future where survival is guaranteed, but humanity is optional. And that is why servitors are truly terrifying, not because of what they are, but because of what they say about the world that made them and the kind of future that awaits anyone living under its shadow.
In the Imperium of man, there are no monuments to servitors. No names etched into stone, no prayers spoken for what they once were. They stand in silence, performing their tasks with mechanical precision, and when they finally break down, when their bodies fail and their usefulness ends, they are dismantled without ceremony. Not because they were evil, not because they were dangerous, but because, in the eyes of the Imperium, they were never truly alive to begin with. That is the final horror of the Servitor. Not the surgery, not the metal grafted into flesh, not even the possibility of a mind trapped inside, screaming where no one can hear. The true horror is how completely the system succeeds in erasing them from memory. A servitor does not leave behind a grave, a legacy, or even a question. It leaves behind only spare parts and an empty workstation, ready for the next unit to take its place. The Imperium will tell you this is necessary, that the galaxy is too cruel for mercy, too hostile for hesitation, and perhaps they are right. Perhaps there is no other way for humanity to endure 10,000 years of unending war. But necessity does not erase guilt. Survival does not make suffering noble, and the existence of servitors forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth, that humanity did not merely fight monsters in the darkness, it became something monstrous itself. Every servitor is a quiet warning, a reminder that in the Imperium, the line between citizen and equipment is thinner than anyone wants to admit. Today they clean the halls and guard the gates. Tomorrow they carry weapons into battle. And somewhere along that path lies the unspoken threat that failure, dissent, or simple misfortune can reduce anyone to the same fate. Obedience is rewarded, individuality is tolerated, humanity is optional. And yet the Imperium endures. It always does. Ships continue to sail the void. Cities continue to rise and fall. Wars are fought, won, and forgotten. Servitors march on, their footsteps echoing through corridors older than memory. If any part of them still remembers who they were, no one is listening. No one is supposed to. So when you ask yourself just how terrifying a servitor really is, remember this. The fear does not come from what they might do to you. It comes from what they prove can be done to you, with approval, with ritual, and with the full blessing of a civilization that believes it has no other choice. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But sometimes the greatest horror is not the war itself. It is what humanity was willing to become in order to keep fighting. And somewhere, in the quiet hum of machinery and prayer, a servitor waits for its next command, obedient, silent, and forgotten.